The sky hung like molten lead. Thick fog draped over the mountain range like a suffocating shroud. Sporadic gunfire echoing from the valley below through the oppressive silence. A voice crackled through the radio, hoarse, defeated. "It's over. We can't hold out any longer." Then suddenly the deep, unmistakable roar of an A-10's GAU-8 cannon thundered from behind the ridge, a bone-shaking rumble that split the earth and shattered the despair hanging in the air. Who would dare fly into this hell when everyone else had already given up? Captain Maya Falcon Torres sat quietly in the corner of the Tactical Operations Center, her presence barely registering among the cluster of senior officers debating the deteriorating situation in the Kandahar Highlands. At 33, she possessed an understated competence that had earned her a reputation as the most reliable support pilot on the base. Someone who delivered supplies on time, never complained about dangerous weather, and always brought her aircraft home intact. The emergency briefing had been called after SEAL Team Delta's reconnaissance mission went catastrophically wrong. What should have been a simple hostage extraction had turned into a nightmare when intelligence failures led them straight into an enemy stronghold. The 12-man team was now trapped on a narrow mountain ledge, surrounded by hostile forces, with their extraction helicopters shot down and burning in the valley below. Major Williams, the squadron commander, pointed to the tactical display with grim urgency. "The weather's getting worse by the hour. Zero visibility, winds gusting to 60 knots, and the entire valley is covered by interlocking fields of anti-aircraft fire. Every approach vector is a death trap." Torres listened intently while maintaining the invisible posture she'd perfected over the past 2 years. Her colleagues knew her as the steady, dependable pilot who handled logistics flights and medical evacuations. Important work, but definitely not the kind that got you noticed or promoted. What they didn't know was that before her transfer to support operations, she'd been one of the Air Force's most decorated close air support specialists. Her file contained details that would have surprised everyone in the room. 157 combat missions in A-10 Thunderbolts, 34 confirmed saves of surrounded ground units, and a Medal of Honor recommendation that had been downgraded to a Silver Star for political reasons. She'd earned the call sign Falcon for her ability to strike with surgical precision from impossible angles, using terrain and weather conditions that would ground other pilots. The reason for her transfer to support duties was buried in classified reports from Operation Enduring Thunder. 3 years ago, Torres had been providing close air support for a Marine unit pinned down in the Hindu Kush Mountains when a catastrophic intelligence failure left an entire Afghan village in the crossfire. Against direct orders, she'd refused to engage targets near civilian areas, instead executing a series of precision strikes that eliminated enemy forces while keeping every civilian alive. Her insubordination had saved over 200 innocent lives, but it had also ended her combat career. "Sometimes doing what's right costs you everything you've worked for," she'd told the inquiry board, "but that doesn't make it wrong." Now she flew transport missions, delivered medical supplies, and provided aerial reconnaissance, valuable work that utilized maybe 10% of her actual capabilities. The irony wasn't lost on her that the military's most precise close air support pilot was relegated to cargo runs while less experienced aviators handled combat missions. But certain instincts never fade. Torres still studied terrain maps obsessively, still maintained her weapons proficiency ratings, and still felt her pulse quicken whenever emergency calls came through the tactical communications. Tonight's situation had all the hallmarks of missions she'd once handled routinely: surrounded friendly forces, impossible weather conditions, and the kind of precision requirements that separated competent pilots from legends. "Sir," ventured Captain Rodriguez, one of the younger A-10 pilots, "what about a high-altitude bombing run? We could at least suppress some of the enemy positions." Major Williams shook his head. "In this weather, you'd be dropping ordnance blind, and our people are too close to enemy positions. One miscalculation, and we'd be killing our own guys." Torres found herself mentally calculating approach vectors, studying the topographical data displayed on the tactical screens. The valley was indeed a nightmare: steep walls, unpredictable wind patterns, and multiple surface-to-air missile sites. But she could see possibilities that others missed: routes that would use the terrain itself as cover, approaches that would turn the valley's defensive advantages against the defenders. The radio suddenly crackled with desperate urgency. "Base, this is Delta Leader. We're down to our last ammunition magazine. Enemy forces are massing for final assault. We need immediate extraction or close air support, or we're all dead in 30 minutes." The operations center fell silent. Every pilot in the room understood the mathematics of the situation. 12 American lives against impossible odds, with weather conditions that made rescue attempts essentially suicidal. That's when Torres quietly stood up and began walking toward the equipment locker. Torres moved with deliberate calm toward her flight gear, each step measured and purposeful. The conversations around her continued, heated debates about risk assessment, weather minimums, and acceptable loss ratios. But she was no longer listening. In her mind, she was already calculating fuel loads, ammunition requirements, and the precise timing needed to reach the trapped SEAL team before their position was overrun. "Captain Torres," called Major Williams, noticing her movement toward the door. "Where are you going? There's no scheduled supply runs tonight." "Flying," she replied simply, not breaking stride. "Flying where?" "All aircraft are grounded due to weather conditions." But Torres had already passed through the briefing room door, stepping into the windswept chaos of the flight line. Rain lashed across the tarmac in driving sheets, and the wind was strong enough to rock parked aircraft on their landing gear. Most pilots would have looked at the conditions and immediately turned back, but Torres saw opportunity in the storm. She made her way directly to the maintenance hangar, where her usual transport aircraft sat alongside 3 A-10 Thunderbolts in various stages of service preparation. Without hesitation, she walked past her assigned bird and began examining the attack aircraft, running practiced hands along fuselages and checking weapons pylons with the expertise of someone who'd lived in A-10 cockpits for 8 years. Sergeant Martinez, the night shift crew chief, looked up from his maintenance logs in confusion. "Ma'am, what are you doing? Those birds aren't scheduled for any missions tonight." "Which one's mission ready?" Torres asked, already knowing the answer from her visual inspection. "The bird on the left just finished armament loading. But Captain, you're not qualified on—" "Load extra 30mm rounds," Torres interrupted, climbing into the cockpit of the A-10. "And prep 2 AGM-65 Maverick missiles. I'm going to need the precision guidance." Martinez stood frozen, his mind struggling to process what he was witnessing. The quiet logistics pilot he'd known for 2 years was conducting a pre-flight inspection of a combat aircraft with the fluid efficiency of a seasoned warrior. Her movements were economical, precise, professional. Nothing like the methodical transport pilot he thought he knew. "Captain, I need authorization codes for weapons release," Martinez said, reaching for his radio. "Sergeant," Torres replied while strapping into the ejection seat. "In about 20 minutes, 12 Americans are going to die unless someone flies into that valley. You can spend time on paperwork, or you can help me save their lives. Your choice." The A-10's twin turbofans began their distinctive whine as Torres initiated startup procedures. In the Tactical Operations Center, Major Williams was receiving increasingly frantic reports from the SEAL team when his radio suddenly crackled with an unexpected transmission. "Tower, Falcon requesting immediate departure, heading 090, mission type close air support." Williams grabbed the radio. "Say again? Did someone just use the call sign Falcon?" "Affirmative," came Torres's calm reply. "Falcon is wheels up in 90 seconds. Delta Team's position is about to be overrun, and I'm the only pilot on this base with the experience to get them out alive." The operations center erupted in chaos. "Falcon, you are not authorized for combat operations," Williams transmitted. "Return to the hangar immediately." "Negative, sir. I'm declaring emergency authority under Article 47B. Immediate action required to prevent loss of American lives. Those SEALs have 30 minutes before they're all dead. And this is the only bird on the base that can reach them in these conditions." Torres pushed the throttles forward, the A-10 beginning its taxi toward the runway, despite the crosswinds that would have grounded smaller aircraft. Her voice came over the radio with absolute professional certainty. "Sir, I've flown close air support in worse weather than this, against heavier opposition than what's waiting in that valley. The A-10 can handle the ground fire, and I can put ordnance precisely where it needs to go without endangering friendly forces. Captain Torres, you're flying cargo planes now. You haven't seen combat in 3 years. 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days, Torres replied as the A-10 aligned with the runway. But some things you never forget, like how to save American lives when everyone else has given up. The aircraft thundered down the runway, lifting off into the storm with the kind of controlled aggression that marked pilots who learned their trade in the crucible of combat. Williams watched the green dot representing Falcon's aircraft disappear into the weather system, then turned to his intelligence officer. Pull Torres's complete service record. I want to know exactly who we just sent into that valley. The intelligence officer's fingers flew across his keyboard, classified files populating his screen in rapid succession. His face went pale as the data loaded. Sir, Captain Torres has 157 combat missions in A-10. Previous assignment, 442nd Fighter Wing, call sign Falcon. Combat decorations include Silver Star, Distinguished Flying Cross, Bronze Star with V device for Valor, and what? And the highest mission success rate for close air support in the entire theater during Operations Iraqi Freedom and Enduring Freedom. Sir, she's not a cargo pilot who decided to be a hero. She's a legend who's been flying supply runs for the past 3 years. Above the mountains, Torres was already beginning her approach to the valley, using the storm itself as concealment while she navigated toward the most dangerous rescue of her career. As Torres's A-10 disappeared into the storm, Major Williams was discovering the truth about the pilot he'd known only as a reliable logistics officer. Her classified file painted a picture that explained everything, and raised disturbing questions about why the military's most effective close air support pilot had been wasted on cargo runs for 3 years. Captain Maya Torres hadn't just been any A-10 pilot. She'd been part of an elite unit specializing in danger close fire support, providing precision strikes within meters of friendly forces when conventional air support was impossible. Her combat record was extraordinary. 157 missions with 0 friendly fire incidents, 34 confirmed saves of surrounded ground units, and a reputation among Special Operations Forces as the pilot they requested by name when missions went to hell. The file revealed why she'd become legendary among ground forces. During Operation Serpent Strike in Iraq, Torres had single-handedly held off an entire enemy battalion for 4 hours, making repeated attack runs while a surrounded Marine company evacuated their wounded. Her aircraft had taken over 40 hits from small arms fire, lost 1 engine, and suffered hydraulic failures, but she'd continued flying until every Marine was safely extracted. 3 months later, during Operation Mountain Fury in Afghanistan, she'd provided precision fire support that allowed a trapped Special Forces team to reach an extraction point. The mission had been so dangerous that 3 other pilots had refused the assignment, but Torres had threaded her A-10 through a narrow canyon while taking fire from multiple directions, delivering ordnance with surgical precision that eliminated enemy forces without damaging a nearby school. But the file also revealed the incident that had ended her combat career. During Operation Enduring Thunder, Torres had been providing close air support for a joint operation in the Hindu Kush Mountains when intelligence failures led to a catastrophic situation. Enemy forces had deliberately positioned themselves among civilian structures, using an Afghan village as human shields while engaging American forces. The ground commander had ordered Torres to engage all targets regardless of civilian proximity, arguing that American lives took priority over Afghan casualties. Torres had refused the direct order, instead executing a complex series of precision strikes that eliminated enemy combatants while keeping every civilian alive. Her insubordination had lasted 6 hours, during which she'd made dozens of attack runs using only her 30mm cannon to avoid collateral damage. The mission had been ultimately successful. No American casualties, no civilian deaths, and complete elimination of enemy forces. But Torres's refusal to follow orders had created a political firestorm. Her actions had been technically correct under rules of engagement, but they'd embarrassed senior officers who'd given illegal orders and created diplomatic complications with Afghan government officials. Her punishment had been swift and quietly devastating. No court-martial, no public proceedings, just a transfer to logistics support with a notation in her file that she was unsuited for combat operations due to excessive caution regarding collateral damage. The irony was brutal. The pilot who'd saved more American lives than any other close air support aviator in the theater had been grounded for caring too much about innocent civilians. For 3 years, she'd been flying cargo runs and medical evacuations, watching less experienced pilots handle missions she could have completed with her eyes closed. As Williams read through the classified reports, one detail stood out. Among the Special Forces teams Torres had saved during her combat deployments was Delta Team, the same unit now trapped in the valley. Staff Sergeant Kevin Murphy, Delta's current team leader, had been a corporal during Operation Mountain Fury when Torres had saved his unit from annihilation. The connection explained everything. Torres wasn't just flying a rescue mission. She was repaying a debt to people who'd trusted her before. People who deserved the same precision and dedication she'd once provided routinely. "Sir," the intelligence officer said quietly, "there's one more thing. According to these after-action reports, Captain Torres has never lost a single American life during any close air support mission. Her record is literally perfect." Williams stared at the tactical display showing Torres's aircraft penetrating deeper into the hostile valley. "And we've had her flying supply runs for 3 years. Yes, sir. Political punishment for doing the right thing." In the valley, Torres was approaching the tactical situation with the calm professionalism that had made her legendary. The weather conditions were indeed severe. Visibility near zero, winds gusting unpredictably off the mountain faces, and multiple surface-to-air missile sites providing overlapping coverage of all traditional approach routes. But Torres saw possibilities that others missed. She was using the storm itself as concealment, flying nap of the earth through canyons that would normally be considered impassable, using her intimate knowledge of mountain flying to turn the valley's defenses against its defenders. "Delta Leader, this is Falcon," she transmitted as she approached the SEAL team's position. "I'm 5 minutes out. I need you to mark your exact position with infrared strobes, then get your heads down. I'm going to make 3 passes. First, to eliminate the anti-aircraft positions. Second, to suppress the infantry advancing on your position. Third, to provide cover while you move to the extraction point." Staff Sergeant Murphy's voice came back filled with disbelief and hope. "Falcon, is that really you? The same Falcon from Mountain Fury?" "It's me, Murphy. And I told you 3 years ago that I'd never leave Americans behind. Today's no different. Ma'am, the weather conditions down here are impossible. Zero visibility, winds that'll knock an aircraft out of the sky, and we're surrounded by SAM sites." Torres's reply carried the calm confidence of someone who'd faced impossible odds before and won. "Murphy, I've flown in worse weather than this, against tougher opposition than what's waiting down there. The only difference is that 3 years ago I was doing it every day. Today, I'm doing it because you need me to." She paused, her voice taking on a more personal tone. "You guys didn't leave me behind when things went bad. I'm not leaving you behind now." Below in the valley, the SEAL team heard the distinctive sound of an A-10's engines cutting through the storm, and for the first time in hours, they believed they might actually survive. When the unmistakable roar of the A-10's GAU-8 cannon first echoed across the valley, the trapped SEAL team's reaction was immediate and profound. After 6 hours of deteriorating tactical situations and increasingly desperate radio calls, the sound of friendly air support arriving was like hearing the voice of salvation itself. Staff Sergeant Murphy pressed himself against the rocky outcropping that had been their last line of defense, watching tracer rounds streak overhead as Torres began her first attack run. The precision was breathtaking. 30-millimeter depleted uranium rounds stitching a perfect line through enemy positions while staying 50 meters away from the nearest friendly forces. "Jesus Christ," whispered Corporal Jackson, the team's youngest member. "She's actually flying in this weather. I can barely see 10 feet in front of me. And she's making precision strikes." The first pass eliminated 3 anti-aircraft positions that had been preventing any rescue attempts. Torres had threaded her A-10 through a narrow canyon approach that nobody else had even considered, using the mountain terrain itself to mask her approach until she was already delivering ordnance on target. "Delta Team Falcon," Torres's voice came through their radios with professional calm. "Moving to second attack run. Stay low. I'm going to suppress the infantry positions on your eastern flank." Murphy found himself smiling for the first time in hours. 3 years ago, during Operation Mountain Fury, he'd been a young corporal watching this same pilot save his unit from certain death. Her voice hadn't changed, still calm under pressure, still absolutely confident in her ability to deliver precisely what ground forces needed. The second attack run was even more impressive than the first. Torres came in from a different angle, using a terrain feature that provided cover from the remaining SAM sites while allowing her to engage the enemy forces that had been advancing on the SEAL position. Her cannon fire walked through the hostile positions with surgical precision, eliminating threats while avoiding any damage to the rocky terrain where Delta Team was sheltering. "Falcon, Delta Leader," Murphy transmitted, "you just cleared our entire eastern approach. We've got wounded, but we can move to the extraction point now." "Roger that, Murphy. I'll provide overwatch while you move. Take your time and stay low. I've got enough ammunition to keep their heads down for another 20 minutes. Back at the Tactical Operations Center, the radio chatter was painting a picture that left experienced military officers shaking their heads in amazement. Major Williams stood behind the communications console, listening to reports that seemed to defy the laws of physics and military common sense. "Sir," reported the air traffic controller, "Falcon has successfully eliminated 7 enemy positions in zero visibility conditions. Delta Team is beginning movement toward the extraction LZ. Colonel Hayes, the wing commander, had arrived after hearing about the unauthorized combat mission. He'd initially come to discipline whoever had launched an aircraft in violation of weather minimums, but now he was listening to what sounded like one of the most skilled combat flying performances he'd ever witnessed. "Williams," he said quietly, "who the hell is Falcon? And why don't I know about a pilot this good?" "Sir, it's Captain Torres, the logistics pilot we've had running supply missions for the past 3 years. Hayes looked at him skeptically. "A cargo pilot just flew a precision close air support mission in conditions that would ground our most experienced combat aviators." "Sir, Torres isn't actually a cargo pilot. She's a former close air support specialist with 157 combat missions and a perfect record. She was transferred to logistics after a political incident involving civilian casualties." "What kind of political incident?" "The kind where she saved 200 Afghan civilians by refusing to follow an illegal order and got punished for doing the right thing." Colonel Hayes stared at the tactical display showing Torres maintaining protective orbit over the extraction site. "We've had a legend flying supply runs for 3 years, and nobody thought to mention this?" The radio crackled with Torres's voice. "Delta Leader, extraction bird is inbound. I'll maintain overwatch until you're wheels up and clear of the valley." Murphy's response carried genuine emotion. "Falcon, I don't know how to thank you. 3 years ago, you saved my life. Today, you did it again. Murphy, just get your people home safe. That's all the thanks I need." In the operations center, experienced military professionals were beginning to understand that they just witnessed something extraordinary. Not just skilled flying, but a demonstration of what happened when the right person was in the right place at the right time, regardless of bureaucratic obstacles. The extraction went flawlessly. Torres maintained protective orbit overhead while Delta Team moved to the pickup point, her A-10's cannon ready to engage any threats that emerged from the storm-shrouded mountains. The rescue helicopter arrived precisely on schedule, guided to the landing zone by Torres's precise navigation instructions, despite weather conditions that should have made the mission impossible. "Falcon, Delta Leader," Murphy's voice came through the radio as his team boarded the extraction bird. "All personnel accounted for. We're ready for departure." "Roger, Delta Leader. Safe flight home." As the helicopter disappeared into the storm carrying the rescued SEALs, Torres began her own return flight to base. The adrenaline was wearing off now, replaced by the familiar mixture of exhaustion and satisfaction that came after successfully completing an impossible mission. For 3 years, she'd forgotten what it felt like to use her skills for their intended purpose, saving American lives when no one else could. Her landing at FOB Sierra was routine, but the atmosphere on the ground had changed dramatically. Word of the unauthorized rescue mission had spread throughout the base, and ground crews, support staff, and pilots had gathered along the flight line. They weren't cheering or making noise. Military professionals understood the gravity of what had occurred, but there was an unmistakable sense of respect in the air. Torres shut down the engines and climbed out of the cockpit, immediately noticing that people were looking at her differently. The invisible logistics pilot had vanished, replaced by someone whose reputation preceded her wherever she went. Major Williams approached with Colonel Hayes, both wearing expressions of professional admiration mixed with administrative concern. Captain Torres, Colonel Hayes said formally, I understand you launched an unauthorized combat mission in direct violation of weather safety protocols. Yes, sir. I accept full responsibility for my actions. I also understand that you successfully rescued 12 American Special Operations personnel who would otherwise be dead right now. The mission was successful, sir. Hayes studied her for a long moment. Captain, why didn't anyone tell me we had a pilot with your capabilities assigned to logistics duties? Torres looked directly at him. Sir, I was transferred to non-combat operations after demonstrating excessive caution regarding collateral damage during Operation Enduring Thunder. My superiors felt I was unsuited for combat missions. Excessive caution regarding collateral damage, Hayes repeated slowly. You mean you refused to kill civilians? I refused to follow an illegal order that would have resulted in civilian casualties, sir. The mission was completed successfully with 0 American losses and 0 civilian deaths. Hayes nodded, understanding the political complexities that had led to Torres's exile from combat operations. Captain, based on today's performance, I'm recommending you for immediate return to full combat status. We need pilots like you in the air, not behind a desk. But Torres's response surprised everyone present. Sir, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not sure I want to return to full-time combat operations. Why not? You just proved you're still the best close air support pilot in the Air Force. Torres looked toward the mountains where she'd just flown her first combat mission in 3 years. Sir, for the past 3 years, I've been flying missions where the primary objective was to help people. Medical evacuations, supply deliveries, humanitarian assistance. Today I use my combat skills for the same purpose. To save lives, not take them. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Maybe the answer isn't choosing between combat operations and logistics support. Maybe it's finding ways to use combat skills for missions that prioritize saving lives over destroying targets. Colonel Hayes considered this for a moment. What exactly are you proposing? Search and rescue operations, medical evacuations in contested areas, precision delivery of humanitarian supplies, missions where my combat experience provides the capability to operate in dangerous conditions, but the primary objective is always preserving life. Hayes nodded slowly. I think we can work something out, Captain. The Air Force needs pilots who understand that the ultimate purpose of our capabilities is protecting people, not just eliminating targets. As the crowd began to disperse, Torres found herself standing alone on the flight line, watching maintenance crews conduct post-flight inspections on her A-10. The aircraft bore new scars from enemy fire, but it had performed flawlessly, exactly as it was designed to do. For the first time in 3 years, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged, not hiding from her capabilities, not being punished for doing the right thing, but using her skills for their highest purpose, ensuring that people made it home alive. Staff Sergeant Murphy approached her one final time before departing for medical evaluation. Ma'am, I wanted to say something. What you did today, it wasn't just about rescuing our team. You showed everyone here what it means to be a warrior who serves something bigger than yourself. Torres smiled. Sergeant, the roar isn't always meant to be heard. Sometimes it's meant to save people in silence. Heroes don't always announce themselves with fanfare or demand recognition for their sacrifices. Sometimes they're the quiet professionals who step forward when everyone else has given up, who risk everything for people they barely know, who choose courage over comfort when it matters most. The real warriors among us often work in silence. Their greatest victories measured not in headlines or medals, but in lives saved and families reunited. If this story moved you, if you believe that true courage deserves recognition even when it prefers the shadows, take a moment right now to hit that like button. Share this story with someone who needs to remember that heroes walk among us every day, often unnoticed until the moment their courage changes everything. Subscribe to TT Soul Stories to discover more untold military stories, because in a world that often celebrates the loudest voices, sometimes we need to remember that the most important battles are won by those who'd rather let their actions speak for themselves.